Hello, everyone. I think we are live in the group. So let me go back. So we are live. Hi, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. Welcome to...
Hi, Solange. How are you?
Good, and you? We have been talking before this went live.
I'm wonderful. Happy to be here with you.
Same here. So we're live in the group. Thank you guys for joining. And I am I'm honored to present Elizabeth Gwetti, who is an attorney and a salary negotiation coach, who was kind enough to come into the group to talk to us about salary negotiation for working women. And I'm sure some of this advice applies to guys too. I know we have a few guys in the group. So I'm really honored to welcome her, and I look forward to her advice too, because it's really a hot topic and a very important topic for us working women. So welcome in the group, and thank you for accepting to answer our questions and enlighten us a little bit on the topic of salary negotiation for working women. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, where you're hailing from?
Sure, absolutely. So thank you guys for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Again, my name is Elizabeth Gwetti. I am located in Orlando, Florida. I'm an attorney. I have collectively about 15 years of legal experience. I work for the world's largest education company, and I negotiate contracts. I'm a contract lawyer. That's what I do. I review contracts, and I negotiate with our customers and our clients. And so negotiation is something that I've come to grow. It's a muscle that I've come to develop, and I've learned over the years by just talking to some colleagues, even prior to working with my current employer, that many women, and in particular women of color, we do not negotiate. Unfortunately, we do not negotiate, and the skill of negotiation is very important. It's not only about money. That's absolutely a very important aspect of it, of course, but the actual skill of negotiation is important, because by being able to negotiate and doing so comfortably, you're able to resolve conflict in your life in different areas, whether it's you have a young child, a 4-year-old, and you're trying to negotiate with your 4-year-old to sit down and have dinner, or you're trying to just resolve something with a spouse or a partner. The actual skill of negotiation is very important. And what I've learned through my years of going to law school, getting my MBA, being trained in executive negotiations by Notre Dame University, is that many women are afraid to speak up because we are afraid of how people will perceive us. So this is a very important topic. It's a very hot topic, especially during the time where we're trying to close the pay gap. That's the big discussion. Everyone's saying, let's close the pay gap. Let's make sure that we're being paid the way our male counterparts are being paid. And so for work in corporate America, and even if you're not necessarily working in corporate America, or you work for a nonprofit, or you work in academia, or even if you have your own business and you want to negotiate your fees with your clients, the skill itself is very important, because it causes you to think differently, and it causes you to empathize with the people that you're working with. So I'm super excited to be here with you guys. I can talk about this all the time, and it's something that I'm so happy that Solange and I are partnering together to make sure that we truly tackle.
I'm so excited about you being here too. And I'm glad that you're saying that, the skill of negotiation goes even further than just salary negotiation. And it's so important for us women in our work, in our businesses, and in our family, because we tend to kind of shy away from conflict and confrontation. And now I understand why your moniker on Instagram is your conflict coach. And beyond the salary negotiation is so important, because for example, for me, and I know for so many other women, one of our sensitive areas at work is dealing with conflict. but not being able to deal with conflict and to negotiate through conflict also gives that message that, you know, you're not leadership material. And it's actually something, it's a criticism that I've had to face in corporate, not, you know, not being ready to deal with conflict and active negotiation, even outside of salary negotiation. So I think it's a really important point. It's so important, and I'm glad you're making it.
Yes,
so,
absolutely. And I think that's, yes, please go ahead. Yes, absolutely. I agree.
Go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say.
Oh, yes. And absolutely. So, yeah, so one of the things that I always introduce as far as when I do my workshops, I always talk about conflict as the basis of negotiation and the ability to navigate conflict, because there are very different styles in resolving conflict, and it's important that women are fluent in the ability to communicate during conflict. Sometimes we freeze up, sometimes we run away, sometimes we become confrontational. So depending on our past experiences, depending on a lot of different factors. Maybe we woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Maybe we haven't had an opportunity to just kind of assess the situation. We may respond in a way that is not as healthy. So as a result, what begins to happen is that type of behavior continues, and it's time to talk about your salary, because many people are not comfortable talking about money. And what begins to happen is that people essentially resolve the salary negotiation in the same way that they resolve conflict with a friend, with a spouse, etc. And so it is so important that we are able to understand where conflict derives from, how we respond to it, and how we can adjust how we respond to it, so that when we get to the point of talking about salary negotiations, we don't freeze up, we don't find ourselves getting agitated or angry, and that respond in the most effective way. And as a woman of color, I know that unfortunately there are many biases against us, right? Let's go ahead and call a spade. And because there are biases against us, especially in the corporate space, if you work in the corporate space, you know, we often feel as though we are carrying the weight of all women of color on us. So we have to be very particular in how we respond. So I'm super excited that we're going to talk about this. And even if we can't talk about it on this call, we will on future calls and webinars. So yes, it absolutely is important, and it touches all areas of our lives.
Definitely. And what have you noticed in terms of statistics and, you know, and numbers as far as women and women of color in particular negotiating our salaries?
Sure. So statistics show that only 7% of women tend to attempt to negotiate their salary. That's an attempt. Only 7% of women attempt to negotiate their salary in comparison to their male counterparts. 50%. So you have this huge gap of 50% where a male would at least attempt to negotiate his salary, where a female would only attempt to negotiate her salary at 7%. And that number doesn't even break down in race and ethnicities and backgrounds, cultural backgrounds and things of that nature. That is just 7% looking at women in general. So my thoughts are, and I think many people would agree, is that it probably significantly lower for women of color. And when I do workshops and I talk to people and I'm going around and asking questions, I always ask candidly, can you raise your hand if you have negotiated your salary? Last week I did a workshop. There were about 40 women. I asked if they would raise their hand and say if they honestly attempted to negotiate their salary. And I think there were only about 6 women out of 40. So that tells you that this is an area of weakness for us. And this is an area that we need to really come together, learn it happen, because when women are empowered and when a woman is at peace, so is everybody else, right? So when you are at peace, your household is at if you are in a relationship or married, the saying happy wife, happy life, that there's some truth to it. So my purpose and my passion is to make sure that we are absolutely talking about this, not just talking about it to be aware of it, but challenging ourselves to make sure that we are appropriately negotiating our salaries so that we don't go to work disgruntled or resentful or angry because we know that a colleague or a male colleague is probably making more money for the same exact work, which is just a catastrophe. It's something that we have to push ourselves to do.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And many times we don't even know that we can negotiate. It took me a few jobs to realize that I could actually negotiate. And even when I did, I just didn't know where to start, what to look for, how to present it. So what is your best advice when it comes to negotiating our salaries, whether it's, at the onset of a job or during performance reviews? What do you think is the best approach?
Sure. So my best advice is to research. Many people, not just women, but many people go into a conversation about salary not really having all of their facts together. They will lead with their feelings and not facts. They will talk about the fact that they are not making enough. They will talk about the fact that their colleagues may be making more money than them, and they don't always have the necessary facts that will sway their manager to listen to them and to agree with them. So the first thing I always say is research. You absolutely must research. You have to know your market value. You have to be able to take the time, hunker down, and really just research. And researching is not a 10-minute exercise. I tell people all the time, research is not a 10-minute exercise. For the position that I'm currently in, it took me 2.5 to 3 hours to really properly research. And it's not simply just go on Google and type in 1 or 2 things on Google. I mean, I went deep into Google. I went to pages 10, 11, 12, because I really wanted to make sure I knew what I was talking about. So I can stand firmly and say, I know for fact what my market value is for my specific market, for my specific industry, for my specific background, education, and experience, and what I bring to the table. Many people can't say that. They are not confident in saying it, and they simply don't know. They just simply know that they want more money, and that's not enough to sway anyone. I mean, if someone came to you, Solange, and said, Solange, I would like to borrow some money, and you would like to know why, right? You would like to know what's their reasoning, what's the reasoning, where is this conversation coming from? I mean, you're going to have some questions. The same thing applies in the workspace. If you are a person that you know for a fact that you would like to negotiate your salary, or your salary is you're undervalued as an employee, you have to come with your facts, not only with your feelings, right? So your feelings, they have place, but as far as negotiations are concerned, lead with the facts. So that's my number 1 tip.
Great. Lead with the facts. And so you mentioned Google, do a lot of Google research, but are there other sources that we can use to conduct our research for salary negotiation?
Sure. So I think I heard you broke up just a little but I think the question was, are there other resources to conduct a salary negotiation? If that is the question, yes. Okay. If that is the question, the answer is absolutely. I always tell people to check out LinkedIn.com, Salary.com, Glassdoor.com, Bureau of Statistics is very that's more official, that's governmental, so that's more official. And also your industry specific, generally most industries have a specific compendium of information that you can source. So for example, the legal field, we use Robert Half for people who are in-house like myself. We would use Robert Half. Every year, Robert Half releases a report that says for this specific industry, for this specific job, for this specific amount of years of experience, this is what you should should be paying the person, or you should be making. And there's also a standard deviation. So they'll say like plus 0.5 or negative 0.5, so that it ranges just a little bit. Every industry has one. Lawyers have it, engineers have it, PAs have it, and it's something to tell people to check out. So I always say, go at least have five sources, so that when you have that conversation with your employer, you can't just say, oh, my market value, let's say hypothetically you're making $45,000 a year, you want to make $60,000 a year. You wouldn't just use one resource that has the highest amount. You wouldn't just say, oh, according to this resource, I should be paid $65,000 a year. No, what you want to do is you want to look at all 5 resources and say, I've searched, I've mined for information, and according to this information, the average is whatever it is, right? So that way you can go to your manager, and your manager's not like, oh, well, we do research all the time and this information is inaccurate. No, I've researched 5 different sources. I've researched 5 official sources, and this is what I was able to pull. And I would love to have a conversation with you about my compensation.
That is great. That is great advice, and something that we don't think of doing often, and when we think of doing it, we just don't know where to start. So that is wonderful advice. And I know earlier, we talked about women of color and how we face particular challenges. And so I wanted to ask you what additional advice you have for women of color when it comes to salary negotiations, because many times the odds are stacked.
Sure. So okay, great. I understood regarding women of color. So women of color, we know, as I mentioned earlier on the call, that there are times that we have extra challenges. There could be a bias against us based on our race, a bias based on the fact that we're a woman, a bias based on the fact that maybe your manager had a poor experience with someone who favors you or looks like you. And unfortunately, we carry the weight of that. So my advice is always to ask, but don't just ask for the sake of asking. Ask in a way that would better position you as an employee if you are in corporate America. So for example, if you have a question regarding what your colleagues that do not look like you are making, I would not ask your colleagues and I would not ask your manager, but I would ask for an opportunity to speak with your manager about your compensation, so that you don't come off as, and I'm trying to use my words wisely here, because I would hate for people to misconstrue what I'm saying. I've had to, let me just talk about my experience. Maybe that's the best way. I've had to come to my past managers as gingerly as possible, just, very hat in hand. And a part of me, I had a lot of conflict about it, because I was just like, if I was a different race, or if I looked different, or, if I was like racially ambiguous, then this wouldn't even be an issue. I wouldn't have to go hat in hand. But what I was able to do is what worked for me was go hat in hand and say, this is something I really want to talk to you about. It's very important to me. And I stayed persistent. So I've known that in the past, there have been colleagues that did not look like me, that probably had a better experience having that conversation without much pushback. I unfortunately had to fight through and be persistent. So my advice is, for women of color, persistence is key. It's not just simply going in and trying your best to be like everyone else. You definitely should walk in your lane and be who you are, but be persistent. Be persistent in how you're asking, be persistent in who you're asking, be persistent with the timing of things, because timing is very important. Timing is very, very important. Many women get it wrong, not just women of color, but many women get it wrong, and their work is doubly criticized. If you ask during the wrong time, they will find a way to come for you. So persistence in asking is basically my advice. And you're not asking, you're not begging, but you are asking to have a conversation, and you're asking to be respected as a colleague. not simply saying like, oh, I'm not making enough money, or this is not sufficient, or I know so-and-so is making more money than I'm currently making, and that's not right. That's the approach. You have to be persistent in how you ask. You have to be mindful of any biases that may be against you. And you have to just work the system, work it the way that you know how to work it. And I think that with that persistence, with that courage, with the bravery that comes along with that you will be successful. It took me many, many, many conversations, but in me being persistent and me being brave, I was able to increase my salary by 57% in 12 months. So I absolutely believe that women can do it. I've done it. I've coached other women on how to do it. And I think that this is our time, and we absolutely have to just step up to the plate and get it done.
That is great. 57% increase in 12 months is absolutely impressive. Very, very
Thank you.
And I appreciate your candidness when it comes to this topic. It can be an iffy topic to discuss, but I think it is important because many of these discussions are not taking place because we are afraid of confronting the way things are, and it is what it is, and we have to find ways to deal with certain situations and certain biases in and outside of the workplace. So thank you for your candidness on this. You mentioned earlier, about timing and how timing is important, and sometimes it can be a no-no depending on which time you choose. What are some big no-nos for us women to absolutely avoid when it comes to salary negotiation?
Sure. So one of the things I've noticed is that many women in the corporate space will attempt to negotiate their salary or bring up the deficiency of their salary during a performance evaluation. So during a performance evaluation, likely receive a merit increase. And a lot of people don't know what the difference is between a merit increase, an equity increase, an annual bonus, and a long-term incentive plan. There are differences that actually exist. So what happens is that many people will talk about their performance, and they will say, and to disclaim this, I'm a lawyer, so I got to do a little disclaimer. To disclaim this, not all corporations are the same, but many of them are alike in this. So during a performance evaluation, you're talking about your performance, you're getting your marks, and you're hearing that you did good on this, you could have worked on this, etc. A lot of people will say, I would like to talk about my compensation, because they know that they're about to get a merit increase, and the merit increase may not be as much as they would like. So the merit increase typically in many corporations, depending on the size, of course, can range between 6% to 6% or lower. So it's typically like 6% or lower, but many corporations will give like a 2 to 4%. So in you getting a merit increase, the company has already set aside that money for people who have performed of a certain caliber. So when you go to your manager and you say, I would like to talk about my salary is insufficient, what you don't know, or the mistake that you're making, is that you're assuming towards your position. But the truth of the matter is that it has already been budgeted. It has already been allocated. And you may get an extra 1 or 2%, but you're not going to get an extra 10% that you're looking for. So what happens is that many women, well, not just women, men do it too, but many women that I've talked to and I've coached, and I even made this mistake about 6 years back. I made this mistake where I said, I want to talk about my salary and assess my salary. I was shaking like a leaf, and I brought it up hoping that they would say, because I did excellent that year, hoping that they would say, you know what, you did so good, we're going to go ahead and give you an extra 12%. Did not happen. The opposite actually begins to happen. So instead of you not only not getting what you want, which is your work is going to be nitpicked. They're going to start to look at your work, and they're going to say, well, there are some things that we could work on for next year, and then maybe next year we can look at your salary. Or they're going to say, well, unfortunately, we won't be able to do it this year, but since you brought it up, let's go ahead and talk about some projects. So instead of you actually walking out of the room feeling confident or feeling as though you were heard, what begins to happen is that your work is nitpicked. So my experience has been, and the ladies that I've coached over the past few years, it has been consistent as well, that bringing up your salary during a performance evaluation is the worst time you can do it. One, there's no money. The percentage has already been allocated. There may be a little bit of a discretion, maybe 1 to 2, maybe if you're lucky for up to 4%, and your work is going to be nitpicked. So for those 3 reasons, my advice is always, if you're going to talk about salary, don't talk about it during your performance evaluation. You want to look at the budget cycle of the company, and that takes time and that takes research, but you want to look at the budget cycle of the company, and depending on the budget cycle, that's when you talk about it. Don't talk about it during the performance review cycle. Those are 2 separate things. So I hope it's the timing. You want to look at the budget cycle. That's the timing that you want to go. That's the calendar that you want to follow. You the performance cycle, because those cycles may be different. If they're the same, you can, but typically they're different for large corporations.
That is great advice, and I think many of us don't realize that, and how it's not the right cycle that we're looking at, because usually a lot of those conversations we tend to get during performance review time, and your manager's looking at you like, what can I do for you?
Yeah.
It leads to a very, very awkward conversation, and then, a lack of understanding on both parties. So that's really, really important to know. Now, I wanted to get a little bit in your coaching world, in your coaching business, and understand how you go about coaching your clients. Of course, don't give us the gold here, but, what is your approach when it comes to coaching your clients? So if I came to you, Elizabeth, I need more coins. Can you help me out? What is your approach?
Sure. So my coaching, it varies depending on the person and depending on the situation. I want to be in the corporate space. They really want to be stay-at-home moms. So what we've done is we've looked at their current salary. We've looked at things that they would like to or willing to give up. And instead of simply just talking about salary, we talk about negotiating other important aspects, such as their benefits, or such as trying to have a better work-life harmony. Because if you are a mom of, say, 3 or 4 children, then that's something that you have to factor into the equation in comparison to someone who is a single woman. Work-life balances or work-life harmony is going to look very different for you versus her. So every different. What I generally do when I coach my clients is I sit down with them. We assess their education, their experience, market, their industry, where they are, where they want to be, what makes them think that they're not paid appropriately, because that's generally what people will say, I'm not paid appropriately. And I always ask, why do you think that? They never really have an answer, but I always say, why do you think that? And it's a feeling thing. They feel it within them, but they can't always articulate. So what we do is we assess their situation. We assess where they are. If they are a person that's trying to be promoted within, that's a conversation in comparison to someone who is trying to receive a higher salary at a new job. And then we also walk them through a script. Basically, we walk them through a script and we say, let's go ahead and practice this conversation, because many people, because this is such a tough conversation, many people need to feel more comfortable and create a script. And in doing so, they can kind of practice. They practice with themselves, practice with me, they can practice with a trusted friend, etc. And then we create what's called a BATNA, which is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Every BATNA looks different, of course, because every situation is different. So what are you willing to give up in order to get what you want? Or what are you willing to on when it's time to have this conversation? Because if you don't have your responses on deck, you will walk away feeling completely defeated. And then afterwards, what we do is we assess their emotional intelligence about the conversation, because emotional intelligence is absolutely something that's important. Many people like to go in head first or they don't go in at all. And I've seen two extremes. And to be frank with you, you have to be able to prepare yourself to go in, but you also have to for a lot of different outcomes, and how you respond to that emotionally can really deter can really determine how you will be in the future. So as far as coaching, I know that was a long-winded answer, but as far as coaching is concerned, there's a lot of different components to it, and I think that every person is unique, and I give them tough love. I give them very, very, very tough love. I will love on you. I will hold your hand. I will walk you through this, but I'm going to keep it very real and candid. And that's my approach. And my approach has helped people go from an additional $2,000 to an additional $35,000. So I'm very proud of my work. I believe that negotiations is a tough thing, but it's not an impossible thing. And I love to encourage and really tell people to be brave, and let's step it up. We can do this. Let's get this money. Let's make some money moves, and let's get closer to wealth. As communities of color, we have the ability to do it, so we can get it done.
Oh, that is great. That is absolutely great, and it should make many women come to get some precious advice from you. Now, I just wanted to take a few questions that, from the audience. And one of the questions, how do you know how much you are worth and negotiating that in a new industry? So
how do you know how much you're worth?
And negotiating that in a new industry.
Okay, so we kind of talked about it in the beginning of our call. It's all about your research, right? So if you are entering into a new industry, what you want to look is what the industry pays for the position. You also want to look at your experience. Even though it's a brand new industry, some of your past experiences can help you and promote you in the new industry that you're going into. So you want to look at your past experience, you want to look at the current industry, and you want to look at what the expectations are from you as far as the job is concerned. So the number one thing is the industry itself. The second thing is the job description, or what is expected from you as an employee. And number three, what are some things that you are bringing from your past experiences, your education, that's going to really positively impact the position. So it's not, many people go in and they're like, oh, well, I've been out of a job for a long time, so I guess I'll go ahead and just take the lowest pay, or I'll go ahead and just accept whatever they give me. Absolutely not. You can still negotiate. You can still talk about your experience. This is an opportunity for you to sell yourself. So even if it's brand spanking, out of the wrapper, new, you still should speak up, and you should let your goals known to the people that you're going to work for, so that when it's time to talk about a potential salary, they're not shocked saying like, where's this coming from? So if you're entering into a brand new industry, the question that you ask is, how do you measure success? What are some KPIs or some metrics that I can support you in order to make sure that we are successful as a company? You want to know what the success metric looks like, so that when it's time to talk about your salary again, you can say, I've done all these things that you've outlined. That's my advice to that question.
Absolutely. That's a great answer. Another question that was asked in the group was that, how do you know, are there any clues that show that an employer is definitely offering you way less than other people at your level within the company?
So that's a loaded question. So the truth of the matter is that if you go to your employer and you bring up the fact that you may be paid lower than another person, a lot of employees, and I know this because this happened to me about 20 years ago when I was a young teenager working at an ice cream shop. I found out that my colleague was making $7 an hour and I was only making $5.50. So you can imagine I was destroyed. And when I confronted my manager about it, she said, this is a fireable offense. Talking about salary is a fireable offense. So I would err on the side of caution as it relates to talking about prospectively another person's salary. There are no clues unless you sit down and you compare paycheck to paycheck. No way of finding out unless the person has come to you and said, I can't believe we're only getting paid $60,000. And you're like, I'm only getting paid $48,000. What do you? So there's really no way of really knowing it. And more importantly, what's really important is that is a poor metric to determine whether or not you are underpaid, because you don't know if that person went in and negotiated, because many people, again, do not negotiate their salary. And if you and John Smith or Susie Q started at the same time and you end up finding out the person's making $10,000 more, lawyer, Susie could have gone in and negotiated her salary, and you did it. So that's not necessarily the employer's fault that you failed to speak up, if that is the actual situation. So I hate to say it, there really are no clues. You just have to put your ear to the ground and pay attention and do your own homework, and then negotiate your salary from where you are, so that you don't compare yourself to where other people are and where you should be.
Great. I think that is great advice, because, and that also brings a certain level of, emotional involvement too, when you think that your colleague is paid more than you, but you don't really have all the facts, and it kind of changed the way you approach the situation instead of going at it in a rational way. So I think that's really great advice. And something else that I wanted to ask, and this was more for me, I know recently a law has been passed which basically prevents employers from asking you how much you're making. So is that accurate, and is that in most states? What can you tell us about it?
I think you froze up at the last. You said is it accurate, or is it in most states?
Is it in most states, and and is it accurate? What can you tell us about it? Do we have to tell employers or recruiters how much we made in our own?
So that's such a sticky question, right? I hate that question, because I've even asked myself, do I have to tell you exactly how much I've made? Like, why do you care, right? You just pay me the way I should be paid. Exactly. So as far as the federal level is concerned, that law has not necessarily been passed. Every state is different. As you know, you're in a state from me. I'm in a state that's an at-will state. So unfortunately, there are laws and regulations that are in place in the state of Florida that support corporations in, I won't say in being discriminatory, but they support corporations in poor practices. So if a corporation has a hiring policy and the policy says we reserve the right to ask your former compensation, and any failure to disclose that information will give us the ability to determine whether or not we will turn down an application, a corporation is allowed to do so, unless, of course, there is a specific law against it. In the state of Florida, where I reside, there are no laws that specifically say corporations cannot do that. So unfortunately, I necessarily say that is factual as far as my standpoint, but I'm more than happy to continue to protected, because with this current, I'm not going to get political, but I'm going to say it, but with this current administration, there are lots of changes that are pro-corporation, which is good, which definitely has a lot of benefits to it. But what many people experience is that laws that are pro-corporation often result in discriminatory or bad behavior. And I'll leave that at that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, but it's still great information for us to have. This is absolutely precious information to have, and I'm glad we're recording this so that we can reuse it. Now, as we covered different different facets of what you do in salary negotiation, can you tell us where we can find you? Online, on your website, where can we find you?
Sure, absolutely. So on Instagram, my moniker, as you duly noted out, no, at your conflict coach. One phrase, one word, your conflict coach. I recently on Instagram and Facebook. So if you use the hashtag salary snacks, that's a way that if anybody, whether in your group or any other group, has a salary question, I will take that question. I will talk about it once a week and answer the question through what I call a quick salary snack. And if anyone has any specific personal questions that they would like to talk to me about, or just they want to talk about more about getting some personalized coaching, my email address is Elizabeth at courageinconflict.com. Again, that's Elizabeth at courageinconflict.com. And I'm more than happy to sit and chat with anyone and just really support women, because I think it's so important that we continue to empower one another. It's important that we have peace. I'm resentful, but when women empower other women, I mean, we can really change the world, and this is our time. So um, Elizabeth at courageinconflict.com, and on Instagram at your conflict coach. So if anybody has any questions, send me a DM on Instagram or an email. More than happy to answer any questions.
Great. That is awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. This was very, very informative. And I definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody else did. And I will be, sure to share the recording as well. So thank you again, Elizabeth. We'll definitely be in touch. And if anyone has any questions for Elizabeth, feel free to, shoot her a DM or just, a question in the comments in or outside of the group. Thanks again. This was great, and I look forward to doing it again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and thank you to the corporate sister, the community, and anyone else that supported this webinar. Thanks so much, you guys.
Great. Thank you so much. Bye.
Okay. Bye.